Hello, and welcome to today's episode of One Step Closer to Graduation. My name is Ra-Shannah Johnson, and today I will be reflecting on an area of multicultural counseling that was previously challenging for me and how my understanding has grown over the course of this term. The area I will focus on is navigating value differences, particularly around racial identities, systemic inequities, and religious and spiritual beliefs, while maintaining ethical, client-centered practice. Multicultural counseling is often discussed as competency. However, what I have learned is that it is more accurately described as developmental process. It is not a checklist we complete. It is not a training we finish. It is an ongoing commitment to self-examination, humility, and accountability. My goal is to demonstrate professional growth in an area that is essential for serving the public responsibly, adhering to professional standards, and engaging in respectful, ethical relationships across differences. Earlier in my development, I understood multicultural counseling primarily as advocacy for marginalized populations. While advocacy remains central to my professional identity, I now recognize that multicultural competence also requires something more nuanced: the ability to engage respectfully with clients whose identities, experiences, and beliefs, including spiritual or political beliefs, may differ from my own. That realization required introspection and growth. So when I first began studying multicultural counseling, I viewed it through a justice-oriented lens. My lived experience as an African American woman shaped my awareness of racism, microaggressions, and systemic inequities. Growing up in Louisiana, I existed in a predominantly Black cultural context. Cultural identity was affirmed, collectively understood, and celebrated. There was an inherent sense of belonging within shared dialect, traditions, and community values. When I relocated to northern Arizona during adolescence, that sense of normalization shifted. I went from seeing people who looked like me everywhere to not. My racial identity became hyper-visible. I encountered assumptions about competence, subtle social exclusions, and instances of microaggressions that I had previously not experienced. In counseling the culturally diverse theory and practice, Sue and colleagues describe how individuals of color often experience heightened racial awareness when entering predominantly white environments. This shift can initiate deeper stages of racial identity development. At the time, I experienced that tradition personally and during adolescence. Professionally, however, I had not yet fully integrated what that meant for counseling practice. Initially, I conceptualized multicultural counseling primarily as advocating against injustice, validating marginalized experiences, and challenging deficit narratives. While those are important elements, I had not yet wrestled deeply with how to remain grounded and therapeutically effective when working with clients who may not share the same understanding of systemic inequities. For instance, how do we respond when a client expresses religious beliefs that conflict with our personal worldview? How do I, as an African American and a counselor, navigate conversations about race when a client minimizes discrimination? How do we avoid imposing our own perspectives even when they are justice-oriented? These questions initially felt uncomfortable for me because they required me to confront the limits of neutrality. However, this was also the beginning of my growth edge. One of the most significant areas of growth came from studying racial, ethnic, and cultural identity development models. Sue and colleagues emphasized that identity models provide developmental roadmaps. They explain how individuals internalize, resist, negotiate, and integrate messages about their group membership. Before fully engaging with these models, I tended to view identity differences primarily through a socio-political lens. The model expanded my perspective into a developmental lens. For example, racial mistrust may be adaptive rather than maladaptive. So, anger about injustice may reflect identity development rather than emotional dysregulation. A few other examples are a client minimizing racism may be in an earlier stage of identity development. A client expressing anger toward dominant groups may be processing experiences of oppression, while another client experiencing racial mistrust may be engaging in adaptive self-protection rather than paranoia. We also have to think about generational trauma and look at how epigenetics and all that stuff also affects clients, right? Understanding identity development helps counselors distinguish between pathology and culturally normative responses to oppression. Research by Matthews, Barton, and Sherrill further demonstrates that counselors who have engaged in deeper ethnic identity development report stronger multicultural counseling competence and self-efficacy. And that finding was pivotal for me. It meant that growth in multicultural competence is directly tied to my willingness to examine my own identity development. My personal reflection is not separate from my professional skill. It's foundational to it. My professional opinion is that you can't have one without the other, ethically. Now, this insight shifted my mindset from I understand multicultural issues, because that's what I initially thought, to I am continually developing multicultural awareness. I'm continually growing. I'm continually learning. I'm continually shifting and changing with the more knowledge that I get, right? Another significant area of growth involved confronting implicit bias and the myth of counselor neutrality. I previously believed that strong awareness of systemic inequities would protect me from bias. However, Sue and colleagues challenged that assumption by highlighting how even well-intentioned counselors can enact microaggressions. Implicit bias research supports this. Yamaguchi and Beatty demonstrate that implicit associations can influence behavior even when explicit beliefs support equality. This realization required a lot of humility on my part. Multicultural growth is not about reaching a point where bias disappears. It's about recognizing that bias exists and building structures of accountability around that. For me personally, that includes ongoing supervision. It includes seeking consultation, engaging in continuing education, remaining open to client feedback without being offended, and also practicing rupture repair. The myth of neutrality suggests that counselors can be value-free. However, in reality, neutrality requires discipline, self-awareness, not absence of perspective. I have a stronger understanding now that professional maturity involves acknowledging influence rather than denying it. Perhaps the most significant and challenging area of growth for me involved navigating religious and spiritual differences. Along with differences, there was also some religious trauma in my background, and I work in an adult resident treatment facility. So from 18 on up, these are adults from, different parts of the country with all different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different political backgrounds, different religious and spiritual backgrounds. And I'm still having to, as part of their clinical care team, support them and, for lack of a better phrase, not be in my feelings because they have opposing views or differing beliefs from my own, right? It's still maintaining that respect and being able to hold a space for them that's safe. Spirituality is often intertwined with identity, culture, and worldview. So for many clients, faith can shape their meaning making and understanding, their coping mechanisms, how they structure the world, moral frameworks, their community belonging. And, sometimes that taps into also, political views as well. Earlier in my development, I felt uncertainty when clients express spiritual beliefs that differ from my own. I frequently question, how do I integrate spirituality ethically? How do I avoid imposing my own beliefs? Especially like there is an intake question that I have to ask when I do my initial sessions with clients as a case manager, where I ask, are there any spiritual or religious beliefs that you would like incorporated into your immediate level of care? I had to practice not just neutrality, but when they say it, I can't, scrunching up my face, and that shows judgment. It doesn't make it a safe space. I questioned, how do I respond when values conflict, right? And again, because of where I work in an adult, residential treatment facility, I often facilitate group sessions and activities. So I was unsure how to navigate making sure all clients felt safe and heard without offending other clients or being offensive towards other clients. In a group setting, you want to make sure that all clients feel like it's safe enough for them to contribute while being able to redirect the conversation if it does get into some hot topics or red light topics or triggering topics, right? And religion can be a big trigger for some clients, or, even the differing beliefs of religion, or if they have religious trauma. So not only making it a safe space for, me not judging them and me remaining neutral and not imposing my own beliefs on an individual or the group, but also making sure that the individuals who were expressing anything about their beliefs were not imposing them on other clients as well or offending them as well, if that makes sense. So that was a big challenge for me, and I used to ask myself that often. Through this course, though, I have come to understand that ethical counseling requires supporting client autonomy even when personal values differ. The key growth for me was differentiating between discomfort, ethical violation, and value imposition. So that battle between imposing my own values on others, that judgment coming off even if I didn't recognize it right away, like doing that self-reflection and making sure that I wasn't inflicting harm and or bias or judgment. And then even talking to supervisors or leadership and explaining situations or describing scenarios and asking, hey, where can I improve in this? Did I violate anything ethically? Am I, and also feeling uncomfortable. Like I said, feeling that discomfort when you're in groups and not running from that, but learning from that and using it as an opportunity for growth and learning, right? So discomfort does not automatically indicate harm. Sometimes discomfort signals that I'm encountering difference and become an opportunity for growth and learning. Ethical violation occurs only if I impose my values or undermine client autonomy. Client-centered practice requires that when clients request integration of spiritual beliefs, we honor that request respectfully and ethically. Again, I had to incorporate that into my job and learned it through working in my job as a case manager and asking those questions and incorporating their answers in without judgment. Or if someone said they didn't have any beliefs and they were atheists and whatever the case may be, incorporating that in respectfully and ethically, honoring that and, not trying to dissuade them from being able to do so. If personal values create significant interference, ethical standards may require consultation or referral. However, referral must be handled carefully to avoid conveying rejection of identity, right? So that client doesn't feel like, well, dang, am I being rejected because of my beliefs and whatnot, right? So there's that layer of protection that we have to offer as well. So growth in this area involved embracing cultural humility. And cultural humility acknowledges that I do not need to share a belief system to respect its significance. That was a huge moment, a huge learning breakthrough for me, I think, was learning that I don't have to share it. I can respect it while working with clients, right? And also in my personal life, that was a big help. This course also deepened my understanding of advocacy. Multicultural competence extends beyond individual sessions. It involves recognizing systemic barriers, because they may not be visible to everyone, and everyone may not understand what those barriers may be. My barriers are the ones that I'm familiar with, may not be the ones that clients that I'm seeing are familiar with, right? It also involves engaging in community advocacy, and challenging institutional inequities, supporting policies that promote access and equity. Plout and colleagues describe how dominant group resistance to multiculturalism often stems from perceived exclusion. So, understanding this dynamic, it helped me approach cross-cultural dialogue with greater strategic awareness, I feel. And advocacy does not require hostility. It requires clarity and relational skill, right? My growth involves balancing justice-oriented values with the ability to engage respectfully across differences. Reflecting on this growth journey, I do see several key shifts, from static competence to developmental humility, from advocacy alone to balanced relational engagement, from assuming awareness protects against bias to building those accountability structures, and from discomfort avoidance to discomfort tolerance, and exploring that to see if there's just an opportunity for education and growth. Multicultural counseling is not a destination, it is an ethical orientation. Identity development models provide guidance, research provides validation, lived experience provides depth, and ethical frameworks provide guardrails. Together, all of these, they shape my evolving professional identity. As I continue developing as a counselor, I recognize that growth and multicultural competence will remain ongoing. It's a journey, right? It's continuous. Personally, I am committed to continued identity exploration, always searching within myself and making sure that I'm acknowledging and aware of any biases that I may have and how that may come across or affect clients, right? I'm committed to ongoing supervision, listening to leadership and mentors and supervisors, feedback and consultation, direction, and also we have the code of ethics, lifelong education with paradigm shifts in the way that the climate changes within our generations and throughout the generations and whatnot. There's always an opportunity to learn things that we didn't know about other cultures, and as diverse backgrounds continue to expand and grow, it's just a lifelong continually learning new policies and the way new laws affect marginalized communities. Also committing to advocacy for marginalized communities was the next point. And then also respectful engagement across differences. So even when we encounter or we engage with clients or people who have different beliefs and whatnot, we can still respect it. It doesn't mean we agree with it. It just, we can respect it and hold a safe space. This course challenged me to confront assumptions, to deepen theoretical understanding, and expand professional humility. Multicultural counseling is not about mastering diversity. It is about honoring complexity, acknowledging power, and centering client autonomy. Growth means remaining teachable, and I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. It's just being flexible and open enough to be teachable, be open-minded to learning about differences of others, about their different views, beliefs, and whatnot. And again, being able to work with them, work with people to incorporate those beliefs respectfully and still be able to assist marginalized communities and clients without imposing our own beliefs or being disrespectful. But again, all that means you as a counselor is being teachable, being open to expand our education and our understanding for a lifetime. So thank you for listening. I'm not a good public speaker, even when you can't see my face.